To all who come to this happy podcast, welcome to FreshBaked Presents, a happy place where each week we combine our imagination with our experience to discuss, challenge, and explore all things Disneyland. I am Ron Berner, and that, of course, is Mr. FreshBaked himself, the indelible David Erickson.
What's up, FreshBaked?
Thank you for joining us, where today, for episode 3 of FreshBaked Presents, we talk Tomorrowland. So what in the Tomorrowland is going on? We'll Scrooge McDuck dive into the mailbag to answer your questions and, of course, our 5 things Disney. So, David, how are you feeling today?
I'm feeling good, Ron. I'm ready to talk about Tomorrowland. I'm excited.
Yeah, it's quite the topic. It's been a bit lost since its inception, so I'm really excited today to get into, the state of Tomorrowland currently, some rumors, some whispers, some realistic timelines, forecasts, predictions, what you'd like to see happen. So I guess a good place to start, David, is where are you at with Tomorrowland?
I don't like it, Ron. I'm not a fan of Tomorrowland. I've got some beef, but I would imagine everybody would pretty much agree with that. There's Tomorrowland. Well, okay, I'll say this: if there was a misstep that Walt had ever made, it's probably trying to make a land based on the future. And we've been paying for that. We've been trying to correct that mistake for 65 plus years. It can't be done. You can't make a land based on the future because it's such a moving target. And this is a conversation that a lot of people have had over the years. But it's no less true today than it has been ever. You can't. Attractions are built to last 20, 30 years, or more. The best attractions in the park are 50 years old. So to try to pin a land on the future is expensive and fraught with peril. So they've been trying to fix Tomorrowland for a long time, and it is today worse than it's ever been, in my opinion. I'm going to run some things down here for you. I want to give you some background. I made some notes on this. So the best parts of Tomorrowland are the attractions that are super old. Monorail is, 50 years old? Autopia, opening day attraction. Right. That's in my opinion. I know you don't agree.
No, it's great.
Space Mountain is 40 years. I don't even know how old Space Mountain is. 40 plus years. Those
70s.
70, right. Since that, they haven't done anything right since Space Mountain, and I'm going to include Star Tours in that because I'm not a fan of Star Tours. I've never been. I've always made that pretty clear. But here's the interesting thing. What do you think is the most common theme? Just put your head into this for a second. What is the most common theme in Tomorrowland right now? What gets touched on the most?
Space?
No. Well, I guess you could say that. Pixar.
Well, Pixar yeah, that's a different conversation.
You've got
crazy.
Buzz Lightyear, okay? You've
Right.
got Finding Nemo and Alien Pizza Planet. None of those things have anything to do even remotely with Tomorrowland, or even you could whatever cockamamie theme you might have for what Tomorrowland is supposed to be now, which is basically anything science fiction or space. But none of those 3 attractions have anything to do with that. Buzz Lightyear has a sort of a vague reference to space, and he's an astronaut or whatever, but he's not. He's a toy. He's not a spaceman. You know what I mean? So even if you were to go that far, he's not even that. There's lasers in the ride, I guess. I don't know. It bothers me. It bothers me that High School the Musical, the series, was in the Tomorrowland Theater just before the parks closed. So so that's the thing that we get asked the most, or one of the things that we get asked the most is, what are we going to do about Tomorrowland? Because it needs something. They need to do something about Tomorrowland.
Yeah, I totally agree. I will say this in defense of, I know you don't like Star Tours, but I was there opening week, we'll say, I don't remember, 85-ish, something like that, 85 to 87, I don't remember exactly. But I distinctly remember being there, and it was the coolest darn thing in the world. And then in hindsight, not even in hindsight, but understanding now what it took to make it or whatever. I mean, it was revolutionary for its time.
It was.
So I appreciate it for that. But yeah, I think the main point of contention that I definitely am not a fan of the Pixar thing, because the Pixar thing drives me insane, because they have a Pixar pier in another park, and they mix and match, and they do those things because they just throw it in there and act like we won't care. And it's like, just make a decision and have conviction with it. I'm fine if you don't want to commit to something, then fine. When it comes to like Pixar, you can just throw anything anywhere, kind of a thing. And by the way, franchises.
Yeah.
But my biggest problem, I think, and I don't know how to solve it, and because I don't know what the answer is, but the answer for me is finding a theme, finding some parameters. Sometimes putting constraints on a decision.
Yes.
Sometimes that can be a hindrance. In this case, I think it would be helpful. I think it would help if they had some form of constraints, like in other words, a theme, to keep it in a way, in a world. If they want to create it in a world like a futuristic world, which doesn't really work, or you just get rid of them altogether and you just mix and match everything in the world in there, which feels like what they're doing now.
Let me run this by you. What if the land wasn't called Tomorrowland?
Yeah.
What if, because I feel like that's the first step in getting out of this desire to make it futuristic or to make it scientific or something like that. What if you just don't call it Tomorrowland? What if you call it something else? What if you call it, well, I don't know. It doesn't really matter. But to your point, one theme, one Adventureland,
Right.
Frontierland, New Orleans Square, one theme. Space Mountain doesn't, or I should say Space Mountain, Tomorrowland, which it did at one point, and I admire, Walt's, wish to do that, to be looking forward, but it's just impossible to keep up with. But just one, give me one thing, and don't call it Tomorrowland. Get out of that trap.
I agree. I mean, tomorrow always comes, right? So,
Yeah.
what are you going to do that isn't so far into the future and so crazy that we're not going to see it happen in our life? And whatever that has to do with, it's certainly the solar system or something weird, because we don't know it. We only have the observable universe, so to speak, kind of stuff. But even then, you're still pigeonholing yourself into something that's been attempted, I guess, in the past, and it just hasn't really worked. I don't like. I mean, if you're changing Tomorrowland, if you talk about people being nostalgic and not wanting things to change, good luck trying to change that. Like the name,
Well,
but I think
what wouldn't you be willing to get rid of in Tomorrowland? This is an honest conversation that people need to have with themselves.
Well, exactly. That's why we kind of touched on it last week, when it's like, I love Autopia and I'm not saying anything. I feel like Autopia is in serious jeopardy of remaining. Maybe, I don't know, but to me, there's nothing untouchable. I mean, I guess it depends on how you define Tomorrowland. So, the monorail will exist in some way, shape, or form. Certainly, I don't think Space Mountain has no chance of going away, because it's so great.
That's the one. That's the one that can't go.
Yeah, and it's fantastic. I mean, it's a great ride.
I went on Space Mountain, just a little segue or sidebar here. I went on Space Mountain last Saturday. It changed my day completely. Like, when I got off that attraction, I was so happy and invigorated. So it still works. Space Mountain is still
It does. And you know how I dominate the park, or how me and Champ do on our domination days. I could tell you exactly what ride we're going to be on at exactly what time of day on most days. And Space Mountain is a very, very, so rope drop happens and we go straight to rope drop space. And the reason is, it was discovered on accident. For one, it gets a line later, but that buzz when you get off of it. So the first thing that your body did was that adrenaline jolt. You get off and you're walking up the stairs and you're almost rubbery. It's like, whoa, that's insane. So I love that. And it became kind of our thing. Again, doing it with a 7, 8, 9, 10, now 11-year-old. So it just became our thing. But even to that point, on the attraction itself, they have done subtle things within it, and it was never announced or never seen, but it appears that way to me, and it could be my imagination post the last year and a half. But it seems like they have better LED lights in there. It seems like the little stars across, like it just looks sharper, and it looks better in a very subtle way. It's kind of like, think of it where you're just replacing light bulbs or you're doing something. So it pops in a little better way. And I've noticed that the last few times, and again, it could be my imagination, but it really looks good, and it's, that old. It looks great.
No, and it strikes a very impressive figure on the skyline. It's John Hench. I mean, what a perfect. Here, we're supposed to be talking about Tomorrowland, but I'm falling in love with Space Mountain right now. What a perfect structure that he created with the Space Mountain building itself. It's fantastic. I love it so much.
No, it is great, and I agree with you that it's probably the one untouchable. I feel like the monorail, simply because it can be used as a transportation system. They can find a productive way to use it in a way that's less attractive based. And part of the conversation that we'll be getting into as the rumors that come with Tomorrowland, the things that are coming. Yeah. One of them is even the monorail, the track. Or this is being shortened or changed or diverted in a way to support other things. So some of those other things that are coming down in the pipeline. What are your thoughts on them? How about you lay them out for us, and then we can get into how feasible and likely they are.
Okay, so there have been rumors about Tomorrowland remodel for forever, really.
60s.
It just feels that way, right? It's funny because even Disney himself, he was the first person to say that Tomorrowland was Yesterland. People think that's a clever thing to say about it, but I mean, he knew it before he was even gone. He knew it. Okay, so they've tried to make it Star Wars. That was the first, when they were talking about Star Wars, that was the first place they looked to make that a Star Wars land. Then they also tried to make it Marvel Land when they acquired the Marvel properties. They weren't going to call it Marvel Land. The concept that was being floated was Stark Expo, which, by the way, I would have been 100% on board with that, because it actually does. Stark Expo does reflect. It is evocative of Walt's original vision, a place for inspiration and technology and just learning and kind of like making the world a better place. That's what Stark Expo is supposed to be. I would have been cool with that, and you could make it science fiction, so it's not based in reality either. You could just make stuff up, jetpacks or flying cars or whatever you want.
100%.
Okay, so there's that. I would have been down with that. There is the most recent one was when Joe Rohde was getting involved before he quit. There was him walking around the park and we're walking on the land, surveying it. We've got that image of him in the Imagineering special of him just picking pieces up and taking them out, right? And you're like, what is he doing? He just took out interventions. And I think Joe Rohde's recommendation was to what was it? What's that? Nuke the site for nuke it from space and whatever. I forget.
Right.
I'm trying to draw from Aliens here. Get rid of everything except for Space Mountain. Level the place. And I would be okay with that also. But that's a difficult thing to get around because you got to close the land basically.
Exactly.
One of the other rumors that was going around was Tron. People want to bring Tron into Tomorrowland, which I get it. It's a pretty attraction. It looks great. I don't know. I'm a sucker for neon. I'm a sucker for ground effects and lighting effects, and it looks great at night. But I don't know if anybody's ever, the people who are designing these have ever set foot in Tomorrowland or Disneyland itself and know how small and compact everything is and how everything is interconnected. That you just can't. You would destroy the entire land just trying to put that thing in there. And then the most recent, which I feel like that was a direction they were going. It wasn't really a rumor, but it was a visible direction. Most recently, we have the retheming of the entrance, where they took out the French fry rocks, and they were starting. It felt like they were starting to reflect the 80s era Tomorrowland, which is very popular with Disney fans. The 80s era, with the whole moving sidewalk, the escalator thing going up to Space Mountain, and some of the effects around the attractions that were, they changed the, when you enter and you look to the right on Star Tours, you look to the left at Buzz Lightyear, where they have that I don't even know, it looks like aluminum, the wall.
Yep.
If you're watching the show, I'll have graphics up here on YouTube, but unfortunately, if you don't, you're listening on a podcast, I can't show you. But those were evocative of the '80s as well. Not evocative, but practically copies. So I feel like they did kind of settle on that, perhaps, or they were going to go in that direction. What do you think?
Well, it's interesting because that conversation I was gonna touch on it a little bit. I feel like that is tipping us off that they're trying to stretch out time. They know that they're not touching it. And I don't mean 2 or 3 years. I mean a decade. I don't think they're touching it. They wouldn't be doing all of those things that we talked about on the show, even a couple of years ago on Fresh Baked. They did that wall that you mentioned. They did that entrance. They still have that sign out there. They put those walkways in there, those entryways. They painted Autopia. Right now they're currently doing the lagoon. All of that, to me, only tells me they're not trying to buy themselves 2 years. They're trying to buy themselves a very long time.
Well, 2 years ago, I don't know if you remember you and I doing that whole bit on Tomorrowland out in front. We were walking around, looking at some of the structures and how '80s the structure still appeared today. But back then, I said 10 years. I think 10 years is light at this point. I think it's going to be more than 10 years before we see.
Well, I think 10 years is you're right. 10 years best case, and then figure 5 years to do it.
Yeah. I mean, look how long it's taken them, by the way, to build get the Guardians of the Galaxy attraction. I don't know. They're on their 4th year now, I think.
The Guardians of the Galaxy.
Over in Epcot. I use that as a basis to how long it takes Disney to do anything these days. They're still building Tron. It's now in its 3rd year, I think.
Right.
It takes forever. So 10 years.
It does.
Yeah. I think it's going to take 5 years for them to make a decision.
Well, no, that's exactly what I mean. I was even saying 10 years because I honestly, you like to think that they know where things are headed, but I honestly don't think they do. And I also think that, again, there's been a regime change that's taken place. And
I was just going to say.
And if you don't think that factors into things, you are crazy. Because here's the thing. There's a couple things specifically. We know Autopia or at least we're almost certain anyway, that Autopia goes over the lagoon. So and then we also know that the tracks, the monorail, or not the monorail, the people mover tracks have been there for 20 years. So those 3 things are a little bit binary where you can't really touch one without touching the other. So that's why I bring up the regime change is if they want to make those changes, they're going to you can't really piecemeal that. It's going to have to be wholesale changes. And to your point a little bit earlier, they're not going to close down an entire land it's just, you can't do that in this day and age. So they try to do what they did though. Well, I mean, if they do that, they will. They'll at least close that portion. And that brings up another point: is the mismanagement of space. And think about the other side of the park, how efficient it is and how loaded it is with everything, the walkways, everything. Right? When I walk through Tomorrowland, again, I'm there at 8:00 in the morning when I'm in Tomorrowland, and by the time I'm out of Tomorrowland before 9 or by 9, I don't see Tomorrowland again. That's just the way I do the park. I'm out. Yeah. I'm done. So in my mind, it just feels like a ghost town, even though there's people around, because the space. So when you get off Space Mountain and you're walking around by Interventions or by the building, by Autopia, there's just such an inefficient use of space that it just feels like it's poorly, managed. It just feels empty, like just based on the geography of it.
It's interesting. You made me imagine or realize just how much of Tomorrowland is actually they're just husks of what they used to be. The People Mover tracks, the People Mover station, Innoventions. These are things that occupy so much space in the land, and they're nothing. They contribute nothing to the land. Nothing.
Exactly right. Yep.
Oh, and by the way,
20 years.
Yeah, and I every chance I get when the topic of People Mover comes up, I try to remind people, because the question still comes up: why can't they do what? I still get asked, how come they didn't fix the People Mover while the parks were closed? Are you kidding?
Yeah.
No, the People Mover tracks This is why they recommended demoing the entire land, because the people mover tracks they're like fused to the spine of the entire land. It's all connected. So if you start trying to rip out the people mover tracks, you're going to rip out the guts of Star Tours and Space Mountain and Innovations. And you could take out the tracks that are over there over Autopia, and probably minimally so maybe the tracks that bisect that walk the entryway into the land. But to do a wholesale destruction of the tracks or anything like that it's impossible.
Right, and the reason that they can't put the people mover back on it is because it's unsafe. It's
unsafe. Yeah, you can't just turn it back on.
Yeah, and also nobody wants to ever talk about this, and I'm speaking out of both sides of my mouth because I maintain that we need to bring the Skyway back. But I don't think Disney is in the business of going back to what they had. They more want to move forward with something. So the people mover, at least, that's a long ways away if it comes back in some way, shape, or form, which will certainly be very different than what it was.
They would be very wise to do so, though, in terms of the people mover. It won't be what we had today or yesterday. And this has been my response. I've always said, will the people mover come back? And I would always say, no, not unless they destroy it and build a new one. If they build a new one, because the people mover was not just a cool attraction, but it was a 30-minute attraction that took you all over, like riding a train, took you all over the land. It lets you get off your feet. It lets you relax, get some views that you can't get. It was a perfect attraction. It was perfect the way it was. And
you want to know a fun fact? I grew up in the 80s at Disneyland. I am in 80s. Literally 82 to 92 literally was my Disney heyday. A constant Disney arrivals. And the people mover is invisible to me. I don't have much memory of it. I don't. I mean, I can picture it. I can see it there. I don't know how to explain it. I don't know why. It's just for some reason we didn't go on it. We didn't do it. Maybe at that age, I was just wanted more of the thrill stuff. I don't know. It's just a funny little blank spot in my memory. I'm like, God, I know it was there. I remember seeing it. I certainly remember seeing it. But that brings up another point. So the reimagining of Tomorrowland, the restructuring of it, to putting things where they go. So Tron, I have my opinion on Tron. It only works because you're thinking of it as Tron. And visually, it'll look good. And Tron. I just don't see them wanting to do a franchise hasn't been great for them.
Yeah, it's a bottom line killer, right? I mean,
box office was not great.
No,
for what they wanted.
It was pretty, but I didn't like the story.
Right. Exactly. And it's more of an esoteric little kind of cult following. Like, I love it and I get it and all those things, but then they would have to mismatch it. And the other thing that's not talked about is the current rendition of Tron, that the plans that they've already paid for and built and designed is not what would come here. They would have to customize it, which is going to be wildly expensive. So even that doesn't really work, and then just try to shoehorn it in. Yeah, so I don't see that. But one of the changes that I'm very curious to hear what you have to say about moving things around. We talked about things that we might walk away from or might see go away. But what about moving things like two things that come to mind, and I don't know if this is feasible or not, but one is the Astro Orbiter up on top to get that vantage point. I don't know even if that's structurally safe anymore. But
I couldn't speak to whether or not it's possible or not. I kind of want to say that it's not. That they haven't given any sort of TLC to that building since they closed it. They haven't. Yeah. And I would imagine that I forget the term, but building codes have changed since they closed that attraction, so that it probably couldn't be done safely today, according to building codes. But I don't want to pretend I'm an expert on that, but it just feels that way to me.
It does feel like a utilization of space if they want to be more efficient. So a couple of things when I was thinking about this. I mean, I would need a map in front of me to look at a few of the different things, but the vantage point, for one thing, the attraction would be up there, so the kinetics of seeing it would be super cool. But not only that, but for riding it, imagine that vantage point from up there. I mean, oh my goodness, seems so cool.
I like the Astro Orbiter. I would like it even more if it were higher. Yeah, I would absolutely.
Right.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt, but I just reminded me of another rumor that I heard 100 years ago I don't know how valid it is, but they were talking about putting it up on the deck of the Space Mountain, up there in that wide open
Oh,
space up there. I don't know if you can do that, but I remember hearing that as a rumor once too.
that would be cool too if it was above, so almost like the queue is below that in
Yeah,
a roundabout way.
yeah.
That is cool. I was going to mention another thing that maybe that could be moved around or shifted around, and I don't know if this is a hot button point or not even feasible, but the like Pixie Hollow is wonderful, and it's very quiet, and but it's also in an area that I feel like if they want to do something with Tomorrowland, it might kind of be in the way. So if I two things come to mind. If you move it over closer to the grotto, Snow White for Snow White, I wonder if it loses that peace and tranquility of where it's at, because it could be that space could be, they got rid of the French fry rocks, and then they could start to use that
Yeah.
space more for Tomorrowland. And I don't know, because what do you think's going? Let's go there. What do you think is coming back there? And the reason I brought that up is because I do think something is probably coming. That's going to be an extension, maybe of Fantasyland. However,
Into Pixie Hollow.
well, into that direction, like an expansion that's going to take place. Expansion meaning adding of basically Frozen.
Yeah,
I feel like
that was something that I didn't get into before when I was talking about rumors. Yeah, they were talking expanding Fantasyland, and they were gonna, and they were you mentioned the shortening of the monorail tracks. That was one of the reasons why they were going to shorten the monorail tracks, was to take over the part where the monorail crosses over Autopia. That was all going to get cropped off, and they were going to sacrifice that part of Autopia as well. You could probably keep it still, but just half the size, and then turn
right.
that space into Fantasyland. And then they were going to put in the Beauty and the Beast Be Our Guest type restaurant there, and put the Beauty and the Beast dark ride on the other side, perhaps at the Fantasyland Theater. But yeah, there are parts of Tomorrowland that were going to come at the expense of Fantasyland. I don't know about Pixie Hollow, but I just feel like that could, I don't think anybody would miss that if they did take that.
Yeah, I don't even mean lose it. I just mean move it over by the
Right.
grotto, because I don't want to eliminate things that, especially things that are quiet spots that people
Yeah.
can go.
Well,
No,
yeah, I'm
it
not
is
sure if you
interesting.
could. I'm not sure if you could. I don't know. I can't imagine the space if it's equal or not, or if it could be redistributed in a correct way.
Well, I
If there,
feel like you would lose the path, like
yeah,
not lose it, but not lose it, but reroute it a little
yeah.
bit.
Uh,
Um,
well, I guess what you would ask what I thought was going to happen, right?
yeah, that's where I was going now. Is I wanted to hear what you think. Not only like what is most likely to happen, expectation if you have one, and if not, or if so, either way. Also, what do you like to see?
Well, I think it all comes down to who's making decisions, because as we alluded to before, I think we were headed in the direction of an 80s, 90s type situation. I think we were heading in the direction of rides, being completely demoed and rebuilt. I think we were going in that direction before Joe Rohde quit, and then before I mean, I don't even know if there's anybody left on the Disneyland Imagineering team today that was there when they were making those decisions back in 2019. Uh, Today, what I think is going to happen is nothing. Um, like you mentioned, Finding Nemo is a perfect sign. If they were going to do anything, they wouldn't be doing Finding Nemo. If they had any plans at all, any plans at all that went beyond, or that were short of maybe 5 years, then they wouldn't be
Right.
touching Finding Nemo. So, because Finding Nemo it's just a literal money pit. It's a money pit.
Exactly right.
I love it
So
in terms of
expensive.
how it looks, but there's low capacity. People don't like it. It's not COVID friendly. There's nothing good about it except for the actual water on top of which everything sits. It's like
Yeah, it
that's
is
the only
gorgeous.
redeeming quality, which is a beautifully wonderful redeeming quality that it has, and it's the reason why it's still here. So I don't think anything's going to happen for the next 10 years. They're gonna try to duct tape that land as much as possible. Like you said, they're just buying time. What I want to see happen is something completely new, something that forgets its past completely. Normally, I don't. Normally, this is opposite of my usual thinking when it comes to Disneyland. I like Disneyland. People say it's not a museum. It is to me. All right,
It is.
Disneyland is a museum to me, and I don't like my exhibits changing. But if you were, that's the one place that I would like to do it because like you've said, it's to coin your phrase, it's put together like a ransom note. It's patchwork. It doesn't have it isn't anything anyway. So what are we losing exactly?
Yeah, exactly. I totally agree. It is. I think the essence of Disney and Disneyland is storytelling, and that is an absolute void that Tomorrowland currently has because it doesn't have a theme. It doesn't know who it is, and they don't know what to do with it, and it just shows. It like, what's the expression when people tell you who they are, believe them?
Yeah.
Well, I feel like that's what Disneyland and the Imagineers, not the Imagineers, it's never the Imagineers' fault, but I feel like that's what the leadership is doing right now.
Imagineers have ideas.
Right, exactly. So
they do have ideas.
That's the problem. Just commit. Just have a theme and commit to it, and absolutely get back to storytelling. That's Disneyland. Disneyland is storytelling. And to your point earlier, get away from the franchises. And when Walt talked about Tomorrowland, he talked about technology, showing the technologies and the state of the future, things that were coming, and all these super cool things that were very interesting that had nothing to do with trying to sell you, Chewbacca ears. All right, David. Anything to button that up on that?
Yeah, I would say if I had the ear of an Imagineer, I would ask them to think outside the box. Forget everything that you know about Tomorrowland. Forget everything that you think Tomorrowland is. Forget it all, and do Tokyo Disney Sea. Okay, this was a thing that Tony Baxter was trying to do. It's their. They've got the submarine ride. They've got a few other things there. It's what a Tomorrowland could have been. And look at that as inspiration and try to think outside the box.
Right. I agree. It's a fun conversation because it's so enigmatic, and there's even like trying to read the tea leaves is confusing because they are touching it up, but they also know that they need to fix it. So like what exactly is happening and what are you telling us?
Yeah.
So we got to put a button in that for now, David, and move along. Okay. And there's a couple fun things that each week I bring up things that happened this week in Disney history, and some of those things are just super, super interesting to me. And this week in particular, there's 4 topics that I just want to share. One is Mary Poppins was released to the public on 8/27/1964. And I bring up Mary Poppins, and of course it was exciting to me because that was the first film that opened the door for things like Who Framed Roger Rabbit and anything that happened to do with mixing animation with live action, which I'm a huge fan of. The film, David, cost $5.175 million to produce, and it was the most spent on a Disney film. And I know you're a big fan of Mary Poppins.
Money well spent. Mary Poppins is my favorite live action Disney film.
It is mine too. I did not know that, so I'm really glad I added it. Here's something that I am not overly familiar with. I did see it as a kid, but I don't know it well. In '89, this week, Mike Eisner and Jim Henson announced that Disney will acquire Henson Associates for $150 million. Jim Henson remained as a consultant to produce the TV shows and films for Disney, but Disney would require all the rights except for the Sesame Street characters.
I think that it would be awesome if Disney just gave it back to the Henson Company, because they haven't done justice to the Jim Henson source material since then, right?
Yeah, it is interesting that there's almost nothing done. Even you see that on Disney Plus and everything, but there's almost nothing there's no representation in the parks whatsoever. You can't even buy shirts.
No. Why buy it if you didn't have a plan? That's what I want to know.
Yeah, that is a weird thing. And I didn't really grow up on the Muppets. I saw them as a kid. One of those things, I watched things like Electric Company and Sesame Street. I don't know why the Muppets weren't on the TV. It wasn't really a choice. I was just a kid, but
they were on my TV. I loved it.
Yeah, I saw them randomly, and when I saw it, I loved it. I just don't know why. You know what I mean? You only had 2 channels back then, so for whatever reason. Also, another really important thing happened that I thought was super interesting. Walt and Roy paid $10,000 deposit towards 51 acres on Buena Vista Street in Burbank. The total price tag was $100,000. This, of course, was for Walt Disney Studios, which still today remains the corporate headquarters for the Walt Disney Company. There you go,
and
David,
almost the headquarters for Disneyland.
Right, exactly. Here's another fun thing that I found to be interesting. So I'm going to read a little bit, very short excerpts from the LA Times that this took place on August 25th, 1985. It was written by Julie Ann Dart. And this is just so much dang fun. And I discovered it doing the research for this when I saw what the headline was as far as This Week in Disney History. Somebody won. Somebody was the 250 millionth person to pass the turnstiles. And the title of the article is Lucky Little Visitor to Disneyland Wins Big. So Brooks Arthur Charles Burr was speechless Saturday, the article says, when he learned that the parade was in his honor, that he had won a battery of prizes, becoming the 250 millionth person to pass through Disneyland's turnstiles, which had opened 30 years prior. Of course, this was 85. As a brass band bedecked in red and gold finery played Disney tunes, and park officials announced that he had won, the 3-year-old, get that, the 3-year-old Seattle resident put his arms around his father's neck and took it all in with a serious stare. He examined, get this, his winning admission ticket as he was handed a lifetime pass to the 3 Disney parks, and examined a placard representing the 30,000 miles of free air travel he had just won. He shook the keys to his new 1985 Cadillac Sedan DeVille back and forth for the applauding crowd to see. Right? 3-year-old. But by the time he heard about his trip for 2 to Japan, David,
oh my God,
he was hugging his mother's leg and appeared distinctly dismayed, as we know with youngsters. This poor 3-year-old was just getting overwhelmed with all these things going on, and he didn't like it shortly thereafter. But the toddler's mood, David, seemed to brighten only when Mickey Mouse bounded over, scooped him up, and gave him a big kiss and a crystal key to the Magic Kingdom. And his father then shouted, "The happiest place in the world." His father later, in the interview, said that they literally came to California from Seattle strictly just to see Disneyland. And that morning, David, they planned to ride the monorail into the park, something, we don't like to do because we want to experience Main Street. But that was their plan. Wow. They found out that the monorail was closed. And it was closed, of course, for the ceremony. Little did they know that it would be for them, but there was Disney knew that person would cross through the gates, obviously, so they had prepped for the ceremony, and that forced them to have to walk all the way around through the main gates instead. About 9:52, they walked through the turnstile, and Dad said his knees began to buckle because bells started clanging and going crazy after his son went through before him. And I guess this cornucopia of gifts was part of Disney's year-long 30th anniversary celebration, in which every 30th, 300th, 3,000th, 30th, 1,000th, and 3 millionth guest receives prizes. More than 8.5 million visited so far to that point, which was August, and they had given away 288 cars, and about 40% of the winners, David, too young to drive.
Yeah.
How crazy imagine a world right now. I just thought that was so fun that I uncovered on accident. Like, imagine right now if Disney did something like that.
I can't, because they wouldn't. I'm sorry.
Exactly, but that's why. Had you ever heard of that? That was complete news to me. I had no idea.
I was aware of that. I mean, I wasn't a big Disneyland fan at the time, but I remember, I've learned about it, in terms of over the years, and so I was aware of that celebration, but I had never heard that story before. I wonder though if he has to make reservations still.
Touche. I'm moving on to Mailbag after that one. That was a home run. That's a walk-off. It's a walk into the mailroom and into the Mailbag. And First one comes from Disney Steve at Onaka_cargo. David, what are your thoughts for Disneyland Forward?
I'm all for it. I mean, yeah.
Well, let me continue. What would you like to see, and what is your expected timeline for the project?
Okay, what am I expecting to see? Complete mystery. They issued concept art, but you can go ahead and just forget that concept art. That was just a placeholder for it could be anything. I very much am in favor of the park expanding. Obviously, I'm very much in favor of them not adding a third gate, but just adding more real estate to the existing two parks. I rather like the idea of Downtown Disney and the hotel district sort of bisecting those two, extensions. I think that's kind of a neat idea. How that works, with all the urban planning and stuff like that is another situation. But I'm excited by Disneyland Forward. But what I'm expecting, I don't know, man. I hope they don't try to do too much with two. I would rather see them do a lot with one theme or one thing, like make a land for each side perhaps, and not try to cram too much in there. As for timelines, be realistic. Again, it's 10 years or more before we see anything. All they're trying to do right now is this whole thing is just to get a bug in the ear of the Anaheim city planners and stuff to treat Disneyland differently, in terms of the things that they want to do. They want permission to multiple zonings and things like that, because right now the zoning doesn't work in Disney's favor, and the way that they build amusement parks now, or even just like a Disney Springs, it's multiple. It's resort, it's shopping, and it's entertainment. It's not just one of those things. And this is Disney just saying, we want you to change your mind about that. So they don't have Disney doesn't even have a plan. So patience on that, I think, is in order.
I hope most of what you just said, it turns out to not be true. And the only reason I say that, is that I hate the idea, and you're probably right, by the way. I'm saying that with complete brevity, or levity, I should say. In that I like to think that Disney has a plan. They kind of know more than they're leading on. But sadly, I think you're right. And I also agree with the concept art, where I tend to like concept art to the nth degree and overanalyze it, thinking that it's absolutely going to be brought to life. That was sort of they just wanted to let us know that something was coming, and it was intentionally ambiguous and innocuous.
Very ambiguous.
I do think that my sense is, and I don't know why I think this, I think it's going to be more of a peaceful, it'll be a gentle land. I don't think you're going to see too much high adrenaline energy things going on over there. I guess an extension of, I don't want to say an extension of Downtown Disney, but I feel like it's going to be an in-park leisure play location more so than like true theme park attractions type of stuff all over. A lot of water in the concept art, if that matters.
Yeah, a lot of water. I hope you're right, though, for whatever that's worth, because I feel like there's this desire by every theme park out there to try to top one another. They've already forgotten about Velocicoaster because you got that new Jurassic Park ride. I can't remember which park it's in, but it's now that's all anybody will talk about. And I don't like the whole keeping up with the Joneses part of this. I wouldn't mind if they went a little lo-fi. Stick to the Disney roots. That's why we love Disneyland above all others still, because it is lo-fi and it's not trying to be something that it isn't.
Yeah, definitely. It definitely has that. There's that inexplicable, you know it when you feel it, but there's that Disney vibe, that Disney energy that just feels good to be there and it feels comfortable. And they've created that, and they can screw it up by adding just nothing. Like, you don't want to feel like, the other theme park down the road. And I don't mean the one that's close to them. I mean that's much, much further down the road. And,
yes, I know the one.
Yeah, you don't want that vibe necessarily, because it's not who you are, and that's.
I don't really like going to that one down the road, to be honest.
Yeah, the one way down the road. To be clear, way down,
the one down
past
the road,
that one.
Yeah. The one down
past
the road is
fun.
Yeah.
Yeah, the one down the road is fun. The one down the road further past that fun one is not so much. It's just a different thing. David, Steve says, You have access to a time machine, but you can only do a single return trip. Do you go back in time to see the park before your time, or do you go forward to see what becomes of it?
That is not a cool question, Steve. I I really want to see both, but I mean, I guess I have to say I want to go back in time. I want to see Walt's Park, but I wouldn't go to 55. I think I would go to 65. I think that's where I would go. I would go to 65 when New Tomorrowland happened, the monorail and all that.
I think for one thing, I'd like to say to Steve. Steve asked this question last week, and like I mentioned, unfortunately, we
Oh
get a
yeah,
lot of questions, and I appreciate it and love it. And I did ask that please submit your question again, and for everybody. And when we see it again, that might obviously show us that you want us to answer it.
yeah.
So I did see
Hang
that,
in
so
there.
I absolutely wanted to include it, and it is a great question. However, it's such an easy answer for me because anytime the answer has to do with would I rather go back or go forward, it's always go back. And the reason I say that, I guess, except for life, I don't want to see the future. I don't want to know what I look like in 10 years. I don't want to know what things look like in 10 years. I just want to go for the ride. I like the journey. So I would go back. And I guess if I had a time machine and I was forced to go to one place, it would certainly be, it's cliche, but if I could go see Walt and go to 55 and see Walt and see Black Sunday, they call it. If I could
Oh
go
yeah.
and experience it, I would. But that's almost cheating because it's like, look, you're going to the first day of Disneyland ever. You're going back to see Walt give his speech. Like, almost any Disney fan was going to sign up for that. And then to extend that a little bit further, I agree with David. I was going to say somewhere in the 60s. Like, I want to see the Skyway and its
Yeah.
inception. I want to see the monorail because it was so, I mean, that Walt's baby, man. He loved that thing.
Monorail was
So,
hype.
oh, it was massive. It was that, talk about futuristic at that time. That thing
Yeah.
was definitely futuristic. It was cool. And that's where I would have liked to have gone. Okay, let's do another one quickly, and then we gotta
Okay.
move. We gotta skedaddle. He asked, the new era of attractions is all indoor. Mickey and Minnie's Runaway Railway, Web Slingers, Smuggler's Run, Rise of the Resistance. Feels like the parks are missing a new visually appealing outdoor rides like Big Thunder. When can we see a new outdoor E or even D ticket attraction?
Well, first I would say he is correct. They are completely missing the. I mean, it's such a. I say this a lot. They are completely missing the point of having attractions that you can see from the ground.
Yep.
Kinetic energy, all that stuff. A land isn't as good if it without that. Every land has one. Big Thunder, the Mark Twain, the monorail. Fantasyland has Storybook Land, teacups. The lands that don't are the new ones, like he says. The Avengers Campus and Galaxy's Edge. They totally, both of those lands desperately need things that you can see from the outside. So I agree. I'm gonna look back at his question again. When could we see that? It has to be
Yeah.
Disneyland Forward, I guess, right? Because I guess there's space. I don't know how they could do it in Galaxy's Edge. There was supposed to be a third attraction at Galaxy's Edge that was going to exist in a space that's currently occupied by Kylo Ren's. I forget what they call his ship. Well, whatever, doesn't matter. There was going to be that sort of the Bantha ride. That would have been great. That would have been a great thing. Now I don't know where they put one today. I sure hope they find some room in the budget to add an exterior, just a basic spinner. Just a spinner would be enough.
Yep.
Avengers Campus, the third ride for Avengers Campus is supposed to be an indoor simulator type deal again.
It's a
Okay,
great question.
so I guess
It's a
Disneyland
great
Forward.
point.
Yeah, I guess
Yeah,
Disneyland
it
Forward.
really is. I totally agree. It's a great point. And it goes back to the Tomorrowland conversation. I mean, I know there's Astro Orbiters and there is Autopia, but Autopia is hidden away. You can't really see it. So, I mean, that's part of the dead void that I feel in Tomorrowland. So that's a really, really great point that I hadn't really actually thought of before, even though I'm constantly talking about the kinetic energy that Star Wars or Galaxy's Edge needs, and, of course, the Skyway, which I'm going to never shut up about. That'll do it for Mailbag for this week. Okay. We got, again, lots and lots of great questions, but we have to move along to the ever-popular, people are chiming in with love for the 5 things Disneyland.
All right.
And that's also a good opportunity to submit the 5 things you'd like to hear us talk about as well. Just, it's always curious because, we're never going to run out of 5 things to talk about. So just give us ideas.
Yeah.
This week, David, top 5 popular things that you love less than the hype surrounding them.
Okay. All right. Am I leading off?
Fun. You always lead off. Do you want me to lead off?
No, I'll go. That's fine. I'm going to start with Star Tours. This is another hill I want to die on. It's the worst ride in Disneyland. I know people like it for whatever reason. They're like, "Hey, bring Star Tours over to Galaxy's Edge," and I'm like, "No, I won't do it." I don't like Star Tours. I avoid it as much as possible. I go on as an experiment, as a social experiment on myself to see if I can handle it, just to see if I like it maybe a little bit more than I did the last time, and I hardly ever win that experiment. I don't like Star Tours. I don't get it.
I am sitting here beside myself. That just makes me think of the next week's top 5 is the 5. If I want to know what you think are the 5 worst rides in either.
Well, I just named one of them.
You just named one of them. Holy moly! I didn't do that. I did this very pragmatic approach because I'm a weirdo. I've created what I call a love deficit. If something is a 10, and where do I think it is? How much do I love it? So to me, my number 5. I know talk about hot button topics. Churro. I'm sorry, a churro is a 10. The hype for a churro is a 10. Now, for me, it's a 5 at best. And it's not. Churros are delicious. Churros are fine. I'm not knocking churros. I just never buy them because my sweet tooth. Like, I would rather go to Gibson Girl. I would rather get a beignet. If I'm going to have a donut type of thing, because I'm not a donut guy or I'm not a cake guy. I'm an ice cream person. So Salt and Straw, Gibson Girl, Ghirardelli's. Like, that's my sweet tooth. It's just not the churro. And again, churros are great. Churros taste fine. There's nothing wrong with them. But they're a 10 on everybody thinks they're the greatest thing in the world. And I'm like, well, they're fine.
I think you just lost half our audience, Ron.
Yeah, wait. I got it.
I imagined myself taking my laptop and just shutting it quietly and like, okay.
But let's be honest for a second. Some people are not donut people. So if you're like, everybody doesn't love donuts. Yeah. So if you're like, that's all. It's not. I'm sorry. I'm honest.
Okay. I'm gonna go number 4. I'm gonna go turkey leg. I'm gonna see your churro. And I'm gonna raise you turkey leg. People talk about turkey legs like, well, I don't get it. I don't understand the allure of turkey legs. They look appealing, like on the spit or whatever you want to call it, but they're just. I feel like a caveman when I eat these things. They're salty and greasy, and they don't taste. They look like chicken or turkey. I'm sorry, but they don't taste like turkey. I don't understand anything about turkey legs. I've had one in my life. I've had one. No, 2. I've had 2. I'm out.
That is so. I put a button in that and everything. My number 4. Pins, trading pins. I get it. It's just not my thing. It's. I don't like collecting something that there's no way to win. There's no. I can't complete it. It's a never-ending, infinite pit of things. And people love pins, and there's a whole like thing going on because sometimes I talk to like little kids that have their pins and then they talk about trading them. So I get it and I appreciate it. I think it's great. I love that it exists. It's just invisible to me.
You know what I don't get about pins? I this might have made my list if I had remembered it. The only thing I don't understand about pins is the trading aspect of it. Who buys a pin with the idea to trade it? Why are you trading your pins? Who's trading pins?
It's odd.
Do you buy 2 of them? Like, what?
Right.
Like, with baseball cards, that has a finish line, baseball cards. But also
Right.
there's comments, there's extras, and you trade your duplicates because you get two in a pack or whatever.
Right.
I don't
Right.
get trading pins. I don't
And
understand
it's almost like you have to. It's like I want that one. It's like okay.
that. All right,
That's great.
number three for me. I'm going to go back to attractions. I'm going to get a lot of hate for this also. I don't. I'm not crazy about Midway Mania, man. I'm sorry. Uh, Maybe it's because I don't like to spin around very much. Maybe it's because I don't like screens, which it does. It's both of those things. It's a cool
Right.
looking ride. Interiors, I like the way it's designed. I like the concept. I think it's fun. I think that the what is it? The idea of it, I enjoy. I just don't like the practical actually doing it. Not a fan.
I love it.
I know you
Love it. Love
do.
it. Love it. I love how we are so similar in so many ways and yet so different in so many ways. I do love it. I don't know why it's fun. It's fun. I don't know. We talked about interactivity last week or a couple weeks ago, and it is very, very, absolutely 100% the definition of interactive. And I'm not the
Absolutely, it
biggest
is.
fan of
Yes.
interactive, but yet
I'll
I love
pass.
that but it's like golf to me. I don't care what anybody else in the world does. All I know is what my number is, and all I know is I want to beat it. And it's a game, like the challenge of what to hit and when to hit it. But I understand the screens thing. People don't like screens, such as
It's the
yourself.
competitive thing for you, I think.
Well, it's a personal competitive thing. Like if
Yeah.
you're next to me and
Right.
well, I'm lying. I'm lying. I'd be mad. Number three, Monte Cristo, and let me explain myself here. I absolutely am obsessed with Monte Cristos. I love them. I think they're one of the greatest things that you can consume. If done properly. And the problem is I consistently order them because I just love the idea of them, and I know what a Monte Cristo is and how delicious they are. For this again is what it does to me. I get an upset stomach. It's so greasy that
Yeah.
I eat them and it upsets my stomach. So it's kind of one of those things. Like by default, it's like I order it and I keep giving it a try because in my head, in my imagination, they're amazing. Then I eat it and it makes me sick. So, Monte Cristo.
I very easily could have made my list too. You mentioned the greasy thing. I do equate it to a turkey leg in that sense there are components of it that are enjoyable. They taste good. I like jelly and powdered sugar and all that stuff, but all put together, it doesn't work for me. I've only had two of those in my life also.
Oh man.
All right, number two, Soren. Whatever iteration of Soren. I mean, when you talk about the things that I hate the most about attractions, giant screens, that you just look at, are the antithesis of a Disneyland experience. I don't want to look at a giant screen and have them say, "Hey, you're flying." No, I'm not. I'm sitting in a chair on top of an erector set built in a giant, warehouse I can see the floor, and I'm looking at a screen that's, by the way, curved in such a way that it makes everything look all bent. I don't. You can't. I don't feel immersed in any way at all, and I don't like that. I don't like Soren. I'm sorry. People love Soren. I don't.
I love it.
Ah!
And here's why I love it. I love it because I'm weirdly nostalgic about things that I appreciate at the time when they came out or whatever. And Soren was so darn cool, that first experience. It also gives me that feeling. This is a heights thing for some people to have it and some people don't. So the screen doesn't bother me in the slightest. And I get it when it does bother people, but the height thing, it feels terrifying to me. Like I don't like heights at all, and I'm dangling up there. And
I'm afraid of heights. Yeah.
Yeah, it gives me that sensation though. Like it's an interesting thing. I don't know. I appreciate it. I like it, and I like California better than World. By the way,
I think most would agree with you.
My number two. Everything David said earlier about the turkey leg, and I'll even add to it.
Awesome.
I eat turkey almost daily. Like I'm a simple guy. I love sandwiches, and I make turkey sandwiches almost every single day. I love turkey. The turkey leg, everything David said, everything about it seems right. I am very much anti looking like a monster when I'm eating food, so I don't want to do
Like
that.
Fred Flintstone.
I have yeah, you can't see me on a podcast, but I have, if you don't know what I look like, I have a horse face with gigantic teeth. And imagine me and all these gums and teeth gnawing on a turkey leg. It would look like the first 20 minutes of Saving Private Ryan, and I'm just not interested in that.
You and me both, by the way. I'm not fond of how my face looks when I eat either. Or do anything.
Forget it. And like, the other thing is, you take the first bite and it's good. The problem is you get into it and it's so blah. And I used to go to USC football games constantly, and we would deep fry turkeys all morning and deep fry them, and we were injecting them with flavor. So every single bite is literally the best flavored turkey you will ever have. And if you haven't done it, don't do it in your house. So the turkey leg is just blah and plain, and it's definitely overrated. I don't like to use the word overrated, but I would tell anybody that was going to buy one, enjoy the first 2 bites and then start complaining to whoever you're with.
It goes on forever. It really does. Okay, so that's it. Number 1 then, right?
Yep.
Number 1 for me is I don't understand popcorn buckets, Ron. Disney puts out popcorn buckets like it's fashion, okay, and people buy them like it's fashion, and I don't understand their allure. I get it, they're cute and they're fun or whatever, but as a thing to own, what do you do with your popcorn buckets when you get home? They're cheap and plastic. You would never use them again. They have no function. They would just take up space in whatever it is where you keep stuff. And it's not like you can pack it because they're plastic and big, and they don't. What do you people do with these popcorn buckets when you get them home? That's what I want to know. There's one that I've enjoyed, and that is the Casey Jr. popcorn bucket with the little whistle and everything. And I felt like that was enjoyable. I could put my popcorn in there, and I could kind of do a little thing, and I enjoyed that. I don't know where that thing is right now, but I'll never understand why people, especially pass holders, it's such a pass holder thing, why people are attracted to popcorn buckets. And I get people ask me, hey, can you buy me that popcorn bucket? Why?
Yeah. It's funny. I wrote down probably 15 things, and I had to do like a little algorithm to see what made the cut. Popcorn and popcorn buckets was on the list, but it didn't make it. My number 1 is Peter Pan's Flight, because the investment is not worth the reward. Get mad. I don't care, people. I don't care. Come at me. At fake Ron Burner. Come at me.
He's going to get killed, Ron.
I'm telling you, here's the thing. It's about enjoyment. Like, what is worth it? There's a point of return where things are worth doing it or watching. And listen, that ride is, the parks have been dead, absolutely dead. I've walked on almost for the last 3 Saturdays in a row. I have gone on 40 rides, me and Champ, each day. It's been unbelievable. Peter Pan's ride, flight, still 40 some minutes for some reason. It's just everybody goes to it. But we did it because we're troopers and we wanted to do things we don't do. We even did the canoes. So we did Peter Pan's Flight, and the last 2 times we have been there, the clock is wrong. They say 25 minutes. It's 15 minutes longer. Add 15 minutes. It was exactly 15 to 16 minutes each time. And that's the problem. Then you get on it, and it's so super unbelievably short. And frankly, they can upgrade the first scene. They can upgrade tremendously to make it, I don't hate the ride when I'm actually on it. It's just that what I need to go through. By the way, it's also the worst queue in both parks. It's just not enjoy the entire experience. Me and my son were talking about it. It's a buzzkill. It's where fun goes to die, is that Peter Pan queue, because you're there for 45 minutes on top of each other. Then you experience a ride that seems like it lasts, 22 seconds. So for me, on return on investment, the love deficit of it being a 10 and my enjoyment level it's my number 1.
So if I'm hearing you correctly, you just want more for your time spent.
Yeah, and I also want honesty. If it's 45 minutes, let me know it's 45 minutes. Don't coerce me and tell me it's 30, and then I'm there for 45 minutes. But yeah, exactly. But David, we are way over, and I am sorry. But I'm also not done because this is my fault, Fresh Baked. I apologize. Once again, at Fake Ron Burner, tell me how I rambled forever. Because I want to do this. I want to announce winners.
Oh, okay.
The response was overwhelming on Apple Podcasts, and we want to encourage you to continue to do so. And I'm going to announce 2 winners. I want you to reach out to me at Fake Ron Burner on Twitter, or you can comment on the at FBP podcast.
Yeah.
Or just hit me up, find me. So number 1, Keeleen Mari. Hopefully I said that right. I apologize. The title, They Do Disney Better Than Anyone. I've been watching Fresh Baked on YouTube since 2014. They absolutely do Disney better than anyone. I was extremely excited with the announcement of this podcast. If you're a longtime Disney goer or someone who has never visited the parks, Fresh Baked is the place for you. I've listened, watched other Disney YouTube channels, and listened to other Disney podcasts, but none of them do it quite as great as Fresh Baked. Thank you. That was amazing. And you just won $50 cash that I will send you. Reach out to me. Sarah B. Love Fresh Baked. As a former Disneyland cast member and proud longtime muffin, right? I'm so excited to have a Fresh Baked podcast. The content is premium, and they're the best source for Disneyland news, tips, and updates. Gotta love Fresh Baked. Sarah, you two have won $50. And we got a lot more that we'll get into in the coming weeks. There will be weekly winners that are to be determined. But I promised on episode 1 that 2 people would win $50 cash. So reach out to me. How about this? That is a wrap, bringing us to the end of the show. Thanks for joining us for that enigmatic Tomorrowland conversation, some Disneyland Forward stuff, the 5 things that I have said to have offended most of you. However, David picked a lot of attraction, so help me out and go at him. Thanks for joining us on Fresh Baked Presents. Join us next week when we get into yet to be determined, but it will be the first week of Magic Key Pass. We have no idea what that's going to look like, so we might get into that. But until then,
Fresh Baked.
That would be. Until then, and take 2. Back to 1. Until then,
Fresh Baked.
Nailed it.
That's
So
gonna
good.
Come together so badly.